Hello and welcome to this exploration of one of England's most infamous monarchs, Henry VIII. Today, we'll delve into the life and reign of a king who fundamentally altered the course of English history. Henry's rule was marked by dramatic shifts in religion, politics, and personal relationships that continue to fascinate historians and the public alike. As we journey through Henry's life, we'll examine how his actions shaped the Tudor dynasty and set England on a path that would lead to its emergence as a major European power. Born on the 28th of June 1491 at the Palace of Placentia in Greenwich, Henry was the third child and second son of King Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. His early years were spent as the spare to his older brother Arthur, the heir apparent. This position would have a profound impact on Henry's development and his later approach to kingship. As we explore Henry's reign, we'll see how his early experiences shaped his later decisions and policies. What is extraordinary is that Henry was usually a very good husband, and he liked women. That's why he married so many of them. He was very tender to them. We know that he addressed them as sweetheart. He was a good lover, he was very generous. The wives were given huge settlements of land and jewels. They were loaded with jewels. He was immensely considerate when they were pregnant, but once he had fallen out of love, he just cut them off. He just withdrew. He abandoned them. They didn't even know he'd left them. Henry's ascension to the throne in 1509 marked the beginning of a new era in English history. At just 17 years old, he inherited a kingdom that was relatively stable, but faced numerous challenges. The young king was eager to make his mark and distinguish himself from his father's more cautious reign. I find it particularly interesting how Henry's early years on the throne were characterised by a combination of exuberance and political savvy. He quickly moved to consolidate his power and establish himself as a force to be reckoned with both at home and abroad. One of Henry's first acts as king was to marry Catherine of Aragon, his brother Arthur's widow. This decision would have far-reaching consequences that none could have predicted at the time. The marriage was initially seen as a way to maintain the alliance with Spain and provide stability to the Tudor dynasty. However, as we'll see later, it would become the catalyst for one of the most significant religious and political upheavals in English history. Henry kept the development of England in line with some of the most vigorous, though not the noblest forces of the day. His high courage, highest when things went ill, his commanding intellect, his appreciation of fact and his instinct for rule carried his country through a perilous time of change, and his very arrogance saved his people from the wars which afflicted other lands. In the early years of his reign, Henry sought to establish himself as a Renaissance prince. He cultivated an image of a learned and accomplished monarch, surrounding himself with scholars and artists. The king was known for his love of music, literature and sports, particularly jousting. This period saw the emergence of what would become known as the Tudor court, a centre of cultural and political power that would shape English society for generations to come. I'm particularly fascinated by how Henry used these cultural pursuits not just for personal enjoyment, but as tools of statecraft, enhancing his prestige and authority both at home and abroad. As Henry's reign progressed, one issue began to dominate both his personal life and the politics of the realm: the need for a male heir. Catherine of Aragon had given birth to a daughter, Mary, but had failed to produce a surviving son. This situation became known as the King's Great Matter, and it would have profound consequences for England and beyond. I find it remarkable how this personal desire for a male heir would lead to such far-reaching changes in the religious and political landscape of England. Henry's quest for an annulment of his marriage to Catherine led him into conflict with the Pope and the Catholic Church. When Pope Clement VII refused to grant the annulment, Henry took the dramatic step of breaking with Rome and declaring himself the supreme head of the Church of England. This act, formalised in the 1534 Act of Supremacy, marked the beginning of the English Reformation. It's fascinating to consider how this personal matter escalated into a national and international crisis, fundamentally altering the religious landscape of England. "Surely, my lord, I liked her before not well, but now I like her much worse. She is nothing fair and have very evil smells about her. I took her to be no maid by reason of the closeness of her breasts and other tokens, which, when I felt them, strake me so to the heart that I had neither will nor courage to prove the rest. I can have none appetite for displeasant airs. I have left her as good a maid, and I found her. The break with Rome had far-reaching consequences beyond the religious sphere. It led to the dissolution of the monasteries, a massive transfer of wealth and land from the church to the crown and Henry's supporters. This not only enriched the royal coffers, but also created a new class of landowners loyal to the Tudor monarchy. The social and economic impact of this cannot be overstated. It reshaped the English landscape, both literally and figuratively, and its effects can still be seen in the ruins of abbeys and monasteries that dot the countryside today. Perhaps the most famous aspect of Henry's reign is his 6 marriages. Each of these unions had significant political and personal implications, shaping both Henry's rule and the future of England. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, was cast aside in favour of Anne Boleyn, whose inability to produce a male heir led to her dramatic downfall and execution. Jane Seymour, Henry's third wife, gave him his longed-for son, Edward, but died shortly after childbirth. The king's fourth marriage to Anne of Cleves was a political disaster that ended in a swift annulment. Catherine Howard, his fifth wife, was executed for treason, while his final wife, Catherine Parr, outlived him. These marriages were not merely personal matters, but had far-reaching political consequences. The quest for a male heir drove Henry to break with Rome, while the rise and fall of various wives and their families reshaped the political landscape of the Tudor court. I find it particularly intriguing how these personal relationships became intertwined with matters of state, religion, and dynasty. The fates of Henry's wives also reflect the precarious nature of power in Tudor England, where royal favour could be as fleeting as it was crucial. The respect, nay, even the popularity which he had from his people was not unmerited. He kept the development of England in line with some of the most vigorous, though not the noblest forces of the day. His high courage, highest when things went ill, his commanding intellect, his appreciation of fact and his instinct for rule carried his country through a perilous time of change, and his very arrogance saved his people from the wars which afflicted other lands. The legacy of Henry's marriages extends far beyond his own reign. His children by 3 different wives, Mary, Elizabeth and Edward, would each rule England in turn, shaping the country's future in profound ways. The religious and political upheavals sparked by Henry's marital affairs would continue to reverberate through English history long after his death. It's remarkable to consider how these personal relationships had such a lasting impact on the course of English history, influencing everything from religious policy to international relations for generations to come. As we look back on Henry's reign, it's clear that he left an indelible mark on English history. His break with Rome and the establishment of the Church of England set the stage for the religious conflicts that would dominate English politics for generations. The dissolution of the monasteries reshaped the economic and social landscape of the country. Henry's expansion of royal power, often through the use of charges of treason and heresy, strengthened the monarchy but also set dangerous precedents for future rulers. In foreign affairs, Henry pursued an ambitious policy that saw England emerge as a significant player on the European stage. His wars with France, while costly, helped to establish England as a naval power. The rough wooing of Scotland aimed at forcing a marriage alliance set the stage for the eventual union of the English and Scottish crowns. I find it particularly interesting how Henry's foreign policy, often driven by personal ambition and dynastic concerns, had long-lasting effects on England's relationships with its neighbours. Henry was an intellectual, the first English king with a modern humanist education. He read and wrote English, French and Latin, and owned a large library. He annotated many books and published one of his own, and he had numerous pamphlets and lectures prepared to support the Reformation of the Church. Henry's reign also saw significant developments in the nature of English government. The rise of figures like Thomas Wolsey and Thomas Cromwell marked a shift towards a more centralised and bureaucratic state. The use of Parliament to enact the king's will, particularly in matters of religion and succession, set important precedents for the relationship between the monarchy and the legislature. These changes would have profound implications for the development of English constitutional monarchy in the centuries to come. As we conclude our exploration of Henry VIII's reign, it's clear that his legacy is complex and often contradictory. He was a king who sought absolute power, yet relied heavily on Parliament to achieve his aims. He broke with the Catholic Church but remained in many ways a traditional believer. He was capable of great charm and generosity, but also of ruthless cruelty. Henry's reign marked a pivotal moment in English history, setting the stage for the emergence of England as a Protestant nation and a major European power. The debates about Henry's character and the nature of his rule continue to this day. Was he a tyrant or a visionary? A man driven by lust and ambition, or a king genuinely concerned with the future of his dynasty and his country? These questions have fascinated historians for centuries, and I suspect they will continue to do so for many years to come. What's certain is that Henry's reign marked a turning point in English history, the effects of which are still felt today. Dimly remembering the Wars of the Roses, vaguely informed as to the slaughters and sufferings in Europe, the people of England knew that in Henry they had a great king. As we reflect on Henry's reign, it's important to consider not just the king himself, but the wider context of Tudor England. The 16th century was a time of great change across Europe, with the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the emergence of nation-states reshaping the political and cultural landscape. Henry's England was very much a part of these broader trends, and his actions both reflected and influenced them. Understanding Henry's reign is crucial to understanding how England transitioned from a medieval kingdom to an early modern state, setting the stage for its future as a global power. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the reign of Henry VIII. I hope you found it as fascinating as I have. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Your support really does make a difference and helps me to continue producing content like this. Do let me know in the comments if there are any other aspects of Tudor history you'd like me to cover in future videos. Until next time, farewell. For Scarisbrick, Henry was a formidable, captivating man who wore regality with a splendid conviction.